Hello, I'm Glenn W. Hunter, and this is Dr. Mel Palmer, and this is Understanding and Connecting with Your Emotions, Episode 1. So, what Mel and I are going to be talking about is men, their emotions, and really how that's processed, how that impacts our decisions, how does that impact our quality of life. Deep down inside, with just a couple of guys, a little bit of knowledge. All right, Mel has a lot of knowledge, but we're going to be talking about how men manage emotions. How do they connect? So, Mel, what gives you the authority to talk about this with such conviction?
Well, one of the things is that I specialize in my practice men's emotional health and dealing primarily with emotions based on my understanding and my lack of understanding growing up about what emotions really were. And so now I recognize that there is a gap between men dealing with their emotional health. And that's why what makes me an expert on it, because I've done extensive research and I work with clients in my practice on identifying and understanding their emotional health.
So, when you talk about a gap between men and their emotional health, how does that happen? I mean, do we just wake up coming, first day of life and there's a gap? I mean, how does that evolve?
Well, Glenn, one of the things that we have is a whole lot of emotions. The other thing about that is we don't know a whole lot about. And because of our family of origin, whether we were taught from a small age about emotions, we've only been given one or two. And for men, we basically were saying, hey, grow up. Real men don't cry. Suck it up. And through the years, we've been able to suppress those emotions and not do it because it appears that we as men are weak, or in some things, to being politically correct, less than manly. And that's why today we're going to talk about, hey, getting in touch with those emotions, finding out exactly what they are, and how do you articulate them.
So, let's start with the middle one. What are these emotions?
Emotions are what we call feelings. And to break it down, we have 7: happy, glad, sad, angry, afraid, hurt, or ashamed. And all other emotions fall underneath those as subcategories. But those are the 7 basics. And if you're looking at where do I start? Let's start with those 7 basic emotions that generate how we respond, how we react, how we communicate, how we make decisions.
So, can you run through those 7 one more time? Because I'd like to be able to share a few examples out of them.
Okay, happy, glad, sad, angry, hurt, afraid, or ashamed.
So, when I'm happy, what's going on with me as just an average guy?
Well, happy also is a state of mind. Mm-hmm. And when I'm happy, that means that I'm experiencing things that are pleasurable to me as I see life in general. Then I'm happy about it. I'm in this state of mind where there's nothing negative going on, mm-hmm. that I'm pleased with where I am at that particular time.
Okay. So as you move from happy to glad, what's the distinction?
Glad meaning that I'm comfortable, I'm content, I'm where I want to be, I'm where I need to be at a particular time. I'm not overjoyful. I'm not ecstatic about where I am. I'm simply glad about things are happening in the sequence in which I think they should.
So as we jump to the end of the spectrum, ashamed.
Now there comes an issue. Ashamed, again, is a state of being. One, you said, if I'm embarrassed, that means that there's something that's been done to me. If I'm ashamed, that means it's something that I've done that's gone against my beliefs or gone against what I thought was right or wrong. So that's where you internalize the ashamed piece or being shameful.
Mm-hmm. So it comes down, when you get down to that in the spectrum, it's that internal processing that really drives the outward manifestation.
Exactly. And it's always based on our beliefs and values when it comes down to being ashamed.
So when you think about beliefs and values, I mean, that's at our core. The impact that emotions have on men are going to be based off of that core.
Exactly. Based off the values and beliefs that's been instilled in those individuals.
So Mel, as we've identified emotions and we can identify and relate it to the impact that they have on us as men, we can actually trace that back to how we process emotions as young boys, and also contrast it to young girls. Am I thinking about this the right way?
That's absolutely correct. In that, as young boys, we were taught, don't talk, don't feel, suppress it. Young boys don't supposed to cry. Grow up, suck it up. Those kinds of things permeates in our minds. However, with young girls, they're taught to be more expressive, to identify. It's okay to cry, identify with your emotions and how you're feeling. It's okay to they learn at an early age to articulate how they're feeling. That was kind of taboo for young boys.
So, in this generation, as we have different ways for young people to express themselves, different ways for young people to identify themselves, are we actually getting better at putting emotion into our young boys? Or when I say put emotion, constructively put emotions into them versus a generation ago?
I think we've gotten worse due to technology, due to the fact that children today are not critical thinkers. So the emotional piece of all of that doesn't happen. And so you don't hear people talking a whole lot about their emotions. And when we say, are we getting better at it? I think what's happening now is that because a lot of things that's happening in this world that deals with young people, the bullying, the suicide rate, those kinds of things are steering us back to looking at how we are expressing our emotions and how we are being able to communicate our emotions from one point to another. And I mentioned technology, cell phones. I saw two young men walking down the street, and both were on their cell phones. And kind of as they went to pass me, I asked them, "Hey, do you guys know each other?" It's like, "Yeah, you're friends, right?" And then I said to them, "Well, why aren't you guys talking to each other?" And he held up his phone and goes, "We are talking." But what they were doing were they were texting. And you know as well as I, it's difficult to express an emotion through a text.
Mm-hmm.
So we are learning through this technology not to use emotions. We use emojis, but yeah, I know what that looks like, but how are you really feeling?
So you're telling me there's a lack of connectivity among people now that's driven by technology and now manifests itself in our daily behavior.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It disallows you to express your feelings. It disallows you to identify with them for one, and put a label on how you're actually feeling. Like there are 346 different emotions. Men operate in probably about 9 of them. Women, maybe 18 of them.
Mm-hmm.
The rest, if you are able to identify with them, you're then able to put an emotion to them and then are able to articulate. I can tell you without a doubt that the better you are at identifying your emotions, the better you are at articulating, the better you become as a communicator.
Okay. So, better connectivity, better communication. I think these are good foundations to build upon as we're trying to understand how to create more functional people.
Absolutely.
One thing we haven't touched on, and I think this is absolutely essential to that part of the maturation process, is the role of families. Now, you had shared with me that families do not emote as well as they once did, maybe going back a generation. What's going on with families? What's the commonality among families where communication is breaking down for this generation?
Well, I think number one is we assume people know how we feel.
Mm-hmm.
We take on that assumption that, if I am feeling a certain way or something happened to me that caused a certain emotion to enact in me, I assume you know exactly what I'm feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a misconception, and it's also a myth that people know how you feel. And then there's that disconnection. What we call the affect is not appropriate for the situation or the emotion that you're experiencing. Like I could be smiling and says, "Oh, I feel fine," but inside of me, I'm feeling anger, or I'm feeling discontent, or I'm feeling embarrassed or ashamed. So the facial expression does not or is not congruent to the actual feeling. So we're out of touch in that respect. Another one is that some families, that's part of their dynamics, is we don't talk about emotions, we don't share emotions, and so subsequently it's not accepted in the family. I went for a long period of time. I went for a long period of time in my life where I didn't know what it was like to miss someone.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got to college and I saw people talking about how they missed each other, I was like, oh, that's fake. I don't know what that feels like. But then that's what sprung my interest in dealing with emotions and understanding what emotions were. And I realized that there were so many emotions that I was unaware of that needed to be addressed.
I see. So we have a lot of emotions that aren't being addressed. We are smoothing over the emotions we at least can identify, but again, not addressing them. As this pertains to men and their development, not just as boys, but as men in their development, what can we do to embrace our emotions better so we can have more functional relationship with others?
Well, first, Glenn, I think what we need to do is to dispel the stigma that men should not talk about their emotions, because that's been killing men for years and for generations through stress, diabetes, hypertension, heart attack, those kinds of things. First, when we dispel that myth that men should not talk about, or if you talk about your feelings, you are somehow weak. That's a societal myth that has been placed on men as a whole, but particularly on African American males. So, number one. Number two is that we have to understand what those emotions are. And once we understand those emotions, it decreases our ability to go from 0 to 60. And when I say when we go from 0 to 60, we go from I'm happy or I'm feeling okay to I'm pissed off. And that's going to 0 to 60. So if we begin to understand and identify with emotions that we can place in between being happy and being pissed off, we decrease the times that we are actually angry or in local vernacular pissed off. So if I'm happy and I can put in there glad, confused, frustrated. So these are all emotions that come in between being pissed off. So I might just be frustrated. So I go from happy to frustration. I don't have to get all the way up to 60 to anger, and I go back down to being happy.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Mel, as you're talking about this transition, there's so much more we have, but we got to save some of it for next week.
Absolutely.
But what I want to do more than anything is share the appreciation I have as you bring these emotions and how we process this and how this works for the betterment of men really being more productive in their lives, all into bite-sized morsels. So I want to take this time to say thank you for your insight. I can't wait for our next conversation as we continue to explore understanding and connecting with men and their emotions, and seeing how we can help more people just be more productive.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm Alfredo Madrid at Executive Universal Services, located at 1945 Chicago Avenue, Suite B, South Riverside, California. Services being provided such as notary public, apostle services for your legal documents leaving the country, visitation supervisor, professional services, document translations, English and Spanish, PDF fillable documents, production, serving the Inland Empire.
This podcast is brought to you by Coach G SAT Training. Coach G provides secret tools and tips to high school students to maximize their performance on their SAT and SAT college prep exams. Remember, scores equal scholarships. Call 951-364-3222 to learn how to get started to earn a spot at the college of your choice.